One point we forgot to add was that 42 happens to be the number of cities in Klal Yisrael, apart from the six main ones. Another 42 Klal Yisrael are commanded to dedicate four cities of refuge, and will also be the cities of Levim, which we said perhaps represents again the notion of not being over occupied with one's personal welfare and possessions and material wealth, etc. Rather, one is prepared to be disciplined, generous, not to be over concerned with oneself, which is the lesson that the Levim and the Beis Hamikdash actually teaches us. And perhaps it's not just a coincidence that there happens to be 42 such towns which were required to sort of waiver from having them for our own use, which is also perhaps 42 is bomb, which represents the dedication a person went to absorb himself with Torah, fully dedicated to Torah, not having any other interest in this world. 42 is also the number of journeys, Klal Yisrael to the Midbar, which was also an expression of not getting over preoccupied with one's material possessions. You weren't never able to get too house proud, too over fastidious with the way the house looks, the way things are sorted out, the way things are clean, etc. Rather, they had to make do with a very temporary form of nomadic life, which was the best training for them then to come and say, okay, we don't have to have infinite tracts of land. We can give 42 portions that in Eretz Yisrael, they will not be ours, they will be for the Levi. Another point there today from my good friend and teacher, Rav Yaakov Ybrleizel Shlita, he told me a nice thought also on Matos, which connects to something we spoke about. He says, Vashem Yislach Lo, Rabbi Akiva cried when he heard this. He said, wow, and somebody just intended to do an Aveira, and they didn't actually complete the Aveira. Nevertheless, they require Hashem's forgiveness. What would happen if a person would willfully perform an Aveira? And he said, perhaps why particularly was Rabbi Akiva so distressed about this? Because Rabbi Akiva was one of the Asor Harugi Malchus, and who were, according to the Piyutim and the Medrash, were liable because they were involved in the sale of Yosef. And regarding the sale of Yosef, Yosef himself said, Atem chashavtem olai lero'o. Elokim chashav l'toivo. It could be a natural fact, it was something that actually transpired to be good. However, your intentions were malevolent intentions, and therefore that perhaps I'm not going to punish you. But nevertheless, there was that element that you intended to perform wrongly. And Rabbi Akiva perhaps was crying because of that. Because he's saying, yes, now we are culpable based on the malintent that was inherent in these acts. One could say, perhaps you could add on, that ultimately we explained at length the Astropolar vote that Rabbi Akiva actually in the 10 Asuri Harugi Malchus was also connected the 10 Kol Asher Yavo Tachas HaShovet or Asiriya Kodesh. Rabbi Akiva was the Kodesh. He was, so to speak, the portion of Hashem in this sale. Look back, you'll see it's Hashem. So perhaps Rabbi Akiva, if he represents the Chelik of Hashem in the sale of Yosef, so to speak, almost like taking Hashem's portion in this iniquity, it says that when Rabbi Akiva was being killed, he was Mekabel Olav Oy Malchus Shemaim. And they asked, how can you be so nonchalant and so almost you're Mekabel Oy Malchus Shemaim under such circumstances? Is one's obligation go so far? Rabbi Akiva said, Kol Yomai B'chol Nafshech. We say every day, even if Hashem takes your life, you still have to dedicate yourself and be Mekabel oil to accept the yoke of whatever Hashem requires you to do. And therefore, I have always worried, how could I perform this to such extent that even if he takes one's life, my life is Rabbi Akiva, how am I going to perform this? I was always waiting. Can I do this? And now the opportunity arises, I'm not going to fully take the opportunity. It says when his life had expired, so in the end, a Baskel went out and said, Ashreich Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva Muzman L'chai Olam Habo. Maybe one could say that since one goes after the kavanah, the intention, so Rabbi Kiva was Akiva ben Yosef, and his part in the sale of Yosef, so to speak. So Yosef said, "Atem chashavtem alay l'toiv l'ra." So looking at the intention of a person, it was an ill intent. However, Elkim chashav l'toiv, the intention of Hakadosh Baruch Hu was a beneficial intention. In which case, perhaps for that reason, Rabbi Kiva merited Chai Olam Haba, because his part in the sale, he represents Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu said the sale was not a bad sale; it was a good sale. It was beneficial. In which case, why should he be punished? Why should Rabbi Kiva be punished for this at all? And the answer is perhaps on the contrary, he's not being punished. Because the Baskel came out and said, Rabbi Kiva, there's no Gehenna, nothing. Rabbi Kiva goes straight to Olam Haba. In which case, in actual fact, it looks to us from our perspective that Rabbi Kiva is suffering. He's one of the Torah Hirukim Malchus. In actual fact, no. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu calling him to give him Olam Haba because he goes after the Kabbana. So maybe you could even say that was why Rabbi Kiva was boicha. He was upset. You're going after the intention. So I'm now really not going to be able to be Moise Nefesh properly for Hashem, because I know that ultimately it's going to be losing his life is not actually losing a life, so Rabbi Kiva is actually gaining Chai Olam Haba. So Shkoyach Rabbi Yankiv with for that insight. Shkoyach.